Recall we proved the Horn-Banach theorem for we assumed all along our calculations that we have a real nonlinear space. Okay, so we had, first of all, this is the first theorem, X a real nonlinear space, W naught subspace of X, F naught a linear bounded linear functional on W naught star implies there exists a functional F naught on the whole space such that the F naught is an extension, F naught of X is equal to little F naught of X for every X in W naught, and the norms are maintained. The bigger functional norm is equal to the lower functional norm. So without destroying, creating any extra damage, within that itself we have worked. This is what the theorem that we have proved. Okay. So we have to really next look at what would happen if we had a complex linear space, nonlinear space. Now basically the idea is the complex number is made up of two real numbers. So anything in complex consists of doing the real thing twice. Okay. So basically there will be something like trying to do two extensions, one for the real part and one for the imaginary part, but with a little bit of clever observation we can see that there is only one extension that is needed. Okay. So we will next look at the complex case. So we have now a complex nonlinear space and now we are given a W naught subspace, same situation, and we are given an F naught which is now a complex linear functional. F naught can take complex values. Previously F naught could take only real values because we are dealing with a real nonlinear space. So F naught could be a complex nonlinear functional. The question therefore is, do these conclusions hold? Whether that will still be true. We can get an extension which could be now a complex linear functional such that it agrees with the original linear functional on W naught and the norms are maintained the same way. Okay. So whether the same type of extension, norm preserving linear extension, is possible in the complex case. That's what we are going to look at. Okay. Then that would give us the complex Horn-Banach theorem. So we will have the Horn-Banach theorem whether we have the real nonlinear space or a complex nonlinear space. Okay. So now let us look at this. So we are given F naught in W naught star. What it means is that, sir, we are given this. F naught is a function from W naught to C now. It can take complex values. It is a functional. Now functionals are allowed to take complex values. And of course it is bounded, linear, etc., etc. The first observation is that F naught is in F naught maps W naught to C. So therefore, for every vector here, the value of F naught at that vector will be a complex number, and therefore it can be written as a real number plus I times another real number. So we write F naught x as F naught x equal to the real part we will call it as G naught x and the imaginary part we will call it as H naught x. Okay. Now you look at the complex numbers. They form a vector space over the field of complex numbers. We can also think of them as a vector space over the field of real numbers. Similarly, if you have a vector space over the complex numbers, we can also think of it as a vector space over the real numbers, where now we are allowing only scalar multiplication by real numbers. So we can think of, so this is the first observation we will make. We can think of, we can look at the real nonlinear space, which I will call it as X R of X over R with the same norm. I am not going to change the norm. Now instead of, since I am allowed to multiply by complex numbers, I am allowed to multiply by real numbers. So I am going to restrict only the field as real numbers. The situation may change. This vector space, as the vector space will have several complicated structures, the dimension will get doubled in a sense. Okay, if you look at the all the complex matrices over say n by n, over the field of complex number, the dimension is n squared. Thus over the field of real numbers, it is 2n squared. Okay, so the dimension, other things will change, but the fact that it is a vector space will not change. Okay. It is a vector space over the real number. So to distinguish between the two, I will write it simply as XR. Okay. Now look at G naught as a mapping from this to R. What does a G naught do? With every vector X, it associates a real number. So I can therefore think of G naught as a mapping from X to R. Is that clear? So I can think of G naught as a mapping from X to R, and H naught also as a mapping from So both these are functionals on that real nonlinear space. You see, I am reducing the problem of this extension to my old real nonlinear space case. So both these are functionals first on the real nonlinear space, and the linearity of F naught, I am sorry, what should I write? And correspondingly, I am sorry, denote similarly W naught R. The subspace also I consider it as a subspace over the field of real numbers. So G naught is only from W naught R, and this is also only from W naught R, because F is defined only for W vectors for every X in W naught. So G naught and H naught are real functionals over the real nonlinear space W naught. So G naught, H naught are functionals over the subspace WR of the real nonlinear space XR. I should call it as W naught R. I don't know why I use W naught. Okay. Right. So everything I am now converting to a problem on the real space. Now it turns out G naught, the linearity of F naught makes the linearity G naught to be linear. Now what sort of linearity G naught should have? G naught should have G naught X plus Y is equal to G naught X plus G naught Y, and G naught alpha X is equal to alpha G naught for all alpha real. Okay, because now we are dealing with real spaces. So now for XY in W naught, F naught X plus Y is equal to F naught X plus F naught Y. Why? Because F naught is linear. But now this is G naught x plus y plus I h naught x plus y, and this is G naught x plus I h naught x plus G naught y plus I h naught y. These two must be equal, and therefore the real and imaginary parts must be equal. So equating real and imaginary parts, I get the real part on this side is this, the real part on that side is that, and the imaginary parts give me correspondingly h naught x plus h naught y. So therefore it says that G naught and h naught are additive at least on W naught r. Also for alpha real number, we have f naught alpha x is alpha f naught x for every x in W naught. Again this is because f naught is real, f naught is linear, but this is G naught alpha x plus I h naught alpha x by definition, and this is by definition alpha into G naught x plus I into alpha into h naught x. Again equate real and imaginary parts, so I get G naught alpha x is equal to alpha G naught x and h naught alpha x is equal to alpha h naught x for every alpha in R for every x in W naught R. So what this says is G naught and h naught are linear functionals on the subspace W naught as a subspace of the real nonlinear space X R. Okay. So therefore G naught h naught belong to W R star. I am sorry, not yet bounded, are linear functionals, real linear functionals on the subspace W naught R of the real nonlinear space X R. Okay. So that's so far so good. Now it turns out, now okay, let me give you we have to now see that G naught h naught are also bounded. Okay. Suppose we get that, then I will have G naught h naught bounded linear functional on the subspace. Anand-Banach theorem says you can extend it. You extend each one of them, G naught and h naught. And if you can extend G naught and h naught, the extended ones will give you the extended capital F naught that we are looking one. That's the general idea. Okay. Extend the real part, extend the imaginary part, and that will give you the extend the general full complex functional. But then we don't have to do two extensions. It's enough if we extend the real part alone. So let me do that part also. Since f naught is linear, now what linear it is? Is it real linear or complex linear?
Why did we consider alpha to be real only?
Because I am looking at in the real nonlinear space. I am looking at in the, if particularly if the alpha were not real, here the real and imaginary parts will get screwed up. Okay, I can't collect the G naught terms and h naught terms. That is why I am pushing everything into the real situation. I am working, because my extension theorems are available so far only on the real nonlinear space. So I am looking only at the real space level. Okay, and yeah.
Which x star exactly related to x?
How is x star related to? XR as a vector space, the elements, the vectors are all the same, right? But see, a vector space consists of two things. One, a set with two operations, First of all, a set with one operation, addition, with respect to which it is an abelian group. Okay? Then there is a field. Then there is a third operation, the second operation which combines the field elements to the vectors to call the scalar multiplications with certain laws. So now I have X, which is an abelian group with respect to addition, right? That is already given because X is a non-linear space, and I have the field to be the complex number, that is given. So I can now combine these two to get alpha X. Combine a complex number alpha and a vector X to get another vector alpha X which obeys all the vector space laws. Now what I am going to do is take the same set with the same addition but change the field to R. That is also a vector space, right? That is also a vector space because whenever you multiply vectors in X by complex numbers, they are still in X, and therefore in particular if I multiply those by real numbers, they will still be in X. So that will define a scalar multiplication. All the laws are obeyed for all complex numbers, and therefore they will be obeyed for, in particular, for real numbers also. So therefore this is also a vector space. So what is the difference between this and this? As vector spaces they are different because even though the carrier set is the same, the field is different. The vectors are the same, addition is the same, scalar multiplication is different. There complex scalar multiplication is allowed, here only real scalar multiplication is allowed. So in general the idea is this: if you have a vector space over a field F and F1 is a subfield of F, then X is also a vector space over the subfield F1. Okay, the structure as vector spaces will be different, the vectors are the same. The vectors are the same, the structure is different because one of the operations is now different. It is multiplication by real numbers here, there multiplication by complex numbers. And what difference does it bring in? It brings a change in linear combinations, because now for linear combinations you are allowed real numbers here, there you are allowed complex numbers. If change is going to come in real linear combinations, the notion of linear independence is going to change, because the notion of linear independence depends on linear combinations. If the notion of linear independence there is a change, there is going to be a change in the notion of basis, because basis is a linearly independent spanning set. If there is going to be a change in the basis notion, there is going to be a change in the notion of dimension itself. So the whole vector space structure is going to be different, even though you are looking at the same vectors, because your operations are different. So there is it is like a vector space is like a black box which has several parts. One of the parts are changed. This is an older model, that's a newer model. New improved vector space, that one. This is the old vector space which was working only on the real numbers. Now I improved it by adding that it can do over complex numbers also. Okay, that's all.
Why do you say that the vectors are the same?
Because the carrier set is the same. I have not changed x's.
But once you do alpha x, that has also to be.
But it is still back in x only.
It is, but if you take alpha to be real, whatever alpha x you get.
It is back in capital X which you started with. That is the same anyway. Vectors are the same. When you say alpha x, operations are the same. Operations are different. The vectors are still the same, isn't it? Your basic x has not changed. You take a vector in it, you multiply, that is a different. You are making an external fellow and making a different operation.
Now we get a vector, right?
That is back in x.
But that vector, which we get by multiplying with the real.
Because you have done an operation, that's what I am saying. You have done an operation that is different, but vectors are all inside sitting the same. The carrier box of vectors you have not changed. But when you plug this fellow to that fellow, there is a reaction taking place, but the reaction is different. The reaction is different because you have changed the other component. You have not changed this component. This component is still the same. Okay. So the vectors, the vector box is the same. The field box has been changed, and therefore when you connect, the reaction is different. Is that clear? That is important there. That if you have a vector space over a field F, and if F1 is a subfield of the field F, then X is also a vector space over the subfield F1, and the vectors are the same, the structures are different. Okay. The algebraic structure that you get is different. Okay. Okay, so for this is the important thing. On the same carrier set, you can do lot of things. Okay, but depending on what you do, you are going to get different structure. But the carrier set is the same. The carrier set is X. For this vector space, the carrier set is X, but the field is C. For this vector space, also the carrier set is X, but the field is different. Is that clear? That's because that's not clear. The extension theorem doesn't make sense. Okay. Okay. So what have we got? I completely lost track of what we were doing. Okay. Since I said that G naught and H naught were linear functionals on the real nonlinear spaces subspace W naught. Okay. Now I will also show it is bounded. Therefore, if I have a bounded linear functional on a subspace W naught in a different structure, right, which is on the real nonlinear space structure, but there I know Hahn-Banach theorem. So at least I can do extensions for G naught and H naught in that setup. Using that setup, I will now come back to the F naught setup. Okay, so let me see how we do it. The first thing that I observe is the following. F naught is linear and F naught is a mapping from W naught to C. So therefore when I say linear there I mean complex linear. Okay, so therefore F naught on W naught as from W naught to C. Therefore, F naught of alpha x is alpha F naught of x for every alpha in C and for every x in W naught. Because the original F naught is a complex linear functional. Okay? Now, in particular, if I put I, therefore, for alpha equal to I, see, I don't know, the electrical engineers may not like I for square root of minus 1. For them J is square root of minus 1, but as for mathematicians it's always I. For alpha equal to I have F naught Ix is equal to I times F naught x. F naught Ix is equal to I times F naught x. But what is F naught Ix from here? It is G naught Ix plus I times H naught Ix. So this is G naught Ix plus I times H naught Ix. That must be equal to I times F naught x, which is I times G naught x minus H naught x. So I written again as the real part and imaginary. So if you compare real and imaginary parts, what do you get? H naught Ix is equal to minus G naught Ix. This and this, compare. H naught Ix is equal to minus G naught Ix. So actually what happens? F naught can be written as G naught x plus I
G naught minus plus J I times
H naught x is equal to minus G naught Ix. Okay? Is that correct?
the RHS is F naught
RHS is I times this. I times this is I times G naught x plus I into I is minus 1. So minus H naught x. Yeah.
So G naught is defined over W naught of R. Right?
Yes.
So you wrote G naught of Ix, that we have not defined.
That is still there. Ix is a vector in W naught.
But G naught is defined on W naught of R.
G naught is defined for all vectors in W naught, but the value is a real number. Remember, G naught is defined on the W naught R means what? The same vectors W naught, but now the field is real numbers. Don't forget the fact that the carrier sets are not changed. The carrier sets are all the same. Only thing I am doing is now restricting to real numbers. Is that okay, or any questions? See what I am doing, probably I should draw a picture, okay? Then it may become clear. So, but I may lose all these numbers that are written on the board, but keep it, I will borrow it from. See what I have here is, I have x, right? Inside this W naught is sitting. And then I have an F naught which takes this to C, W naught to C. Now what I am doing is, I am keeping the same x, I am keeping the same W naught. Now I am having a G naught which maps it to R. But the only difference is, here this x is made into a vector space over C, here the x is made into a vector space over R. This fellow here is treated as a subspace of this vector space, this fellow here is treated as a subspace of this vector space. The vectors are all the same, no change in the vectors. It is only the operations that are changing. Okay, so the same x, same W naught, same x, same W naught. But there scalar multiplication is by C allowed, here scalar multiplication by R allowed. There F naught evaluates and gives a complex number, here G naught evaluates and gives a real number. That's all that is happening there. Is that okay? Still some problem.
Then how is Ix in W?
Why is Ix not in W naught? Tell me.
Because we don't have I in W. I is in W naught, the field is R.
No.
W naught of
W naught is W naught. It is a box. It has come with some vectors inside it. And that box I have not changed. And whenever a vector is in the box, my previous fellow says any multiple of that real or complex is in that box. Because it is a subspace, even here, any multiple of W naught, whether real or complex, will be in the box W naught, irrespective of what vector space I treat it as or not. Originally I am given that W naught is a subspace of the complex vector space X, and therefore any complex multiple of W naught vectors will also be in W naught. So I take the box W naught, whether I multiply by real number, whether I multiply by complex number, the W naught box is still the same. Nothing is going to change in that. You should be remembering that very carefully. Think for a moment. I have not changed the box W naught. Whatever vectors were there, they are still there. And when a vector was there, its I multiple was also there, and the box must contain, the same box has not been changed. Whenever an x was there, Ix should also be in the box. So that W naught box has x, Ix, everything. The only difference now is, x and Ix are linearly dependent here, whereas x and Ix are not linearly dependent here. Why? Because here When you say linear dependence, you want linear combination. That means you are allowed only real multiples. So x and ix will be linearly independent here, whereas x and ix will be linearly dependent there. That will be the only difference that will take place, because of this combination allows real numbers only. Here combinations do not allow, they allow complex numbers there. So the difference will come when you are looking at linear independence, linear combinations, basis, dimension, etc. But the vectors are the same, right? Let me give you a simple example. Let us look at, forget about Hahn-Banach theorem for the time being, okay? So let me give you, to make this point very, very clear to you, let us take C2, even, let me take even C. What is C? C is a, let me take, okay, just to avoid confusion, let me take x to be C2, okay, and then f to be C. Right. What are all the vectors here? Forget about the field for the moment. What do I mean by C2? I am looking at all vectors of the form Z1, Z2, where Zi belongs to C. Right? That is what is meant by C2. The set of all two component vectors where the components are complex numbers. So now, what does it mean to say I am using this field? That means I can multiply any vector here by complex numbers. That is what I mean. That is a vector space over the complex numbers. What is the dimension of that vector space? It is 2, because now let us say the dimension is, because 1, 0, 0, 1 form a basis, because any vector of this form is z1 times 1 plus z2 times 0, 1. Z1 and Z2 are allowed to be complex numbers, right? Now let us take the same situation. I am going to take C2 only, same vectors. I have not changed the vectors. Again, so whatever vectors were here, they are also here. So that box has not been changed. There are two components in the vector space box. One component is the vector box, the other component is the field box, and there are some connections. One connection does addition, which is a loop inside C2, and the other connection is a connection between the field box and the vector boxes and loops, and finally the result comes out in the vector box. Okay. So now I am going to take the field as R. Right. Now the vectors have not changed. Suppose I have a vector here I2 plus I. This is x. Ix is what? Minus 1. That is also there. Just because I made the field real, it didn't mean that when x is there, Ix is not there. It is still there. That's your problem. Okay. That is what you are not able to get. When x is there, how is Ix there? It will be there. It was there and it will continue to be there. Okay. So it was there and it will continue to be there because I have not meddled with the box. I am only meddled with the connections. I have meddled only with the connections. Now you will see the dimension is 4 because the basis is 1, 0, I 0, 0, 1, 0, I. Previously this and this were linearly dependent, but now these two are linearly independent. X and Ix were linearly dependent here, X and Ix become linearly independent here. because you can't express this as a real multiple of this, because now we are allowed only real multiple. But whereas here I could express this as a complex multiple of this, and therefore that fellow is gone. And that is what is going to change. Vectors are not going to change. The same vectors are going to sit there, but only the operations that are there and the underlying operations, the algebra is going to change. Okay. The same set, but algebra is different. In fact, half of the algebra is the same. Addition is the same. One part of the arithmetic has been changed. That's all the difference between these two. No vectors have been changed. Okay. So therefore, this is a fundamental simple thing, that whenever you have vector space over any field F, if F1 is a subfield, it will also be a vector space over F1. The dimensions will keep changing. Here is a small exercise. Take the real numbers as our x. Put for thought. Take x to be the real numbers. Take the field also to be the real number. What is the dimension? 1. Right? Now take the x to be r. Same. Again, the box. That box of vectors has not been changed. Now change the field to be the rational numbers. What is the dimension? Infinity. Same box. One civilization looks at it as an infinite dimensional space. That civilization did not know multiplication of two real numbers. They knew only how to multiply a real number by a rational number. So that civilization, for it is an enormous stars that look like an infinite dimensional space. The line which we see it as a one-dimensional thing. If your brain and eye was so trained to do only arithmetic with rationals and reals, then it will see it as an infinite dimensional space. That's where the problem is. You see, that's where if you are stuck with rational numbers only, there are certain problems that you will encounter with. I had a friend in the computer science department several years ago, in the early 70s. Nambiar. Does anybody know about him? Professor Nambiar. He was at JNU, then subsequently retired and settled in the US. He has a nice web page where we will go on exchanging views. He used to always argue, for computer scientists, we don't need your irrational numbers at all. Because we always terminate our computation in decimal places after 10 or 12 or 15. So we deal with only rational numbers. We don't need irrational numbers at all. So then next day he will come up with some problem for which I will tell him, no, don't use any number, state it only with rational numbers. Your sole problem, you must now state it only using rational numbers, because you don't need irrational numbers. Then you go back, think, concoct, and finally said, yes, we do need real numbers. So this sort of situation will keep popping up. But this is what is happening. This fundamental carrier set may be the same field. See, therefore, there are two major ingredients that go into making the vector space. Okay. If you change one of them, the structure will change, but the old box remains one of the boxes remains the same. Okay. See, it is like something like this. This is R stands for, say, Rava. Rava is what? Soji or whatever you call it. And let's say that F has both sugar as two small boxes, which has sugar as well as something masala, okay, the hot masalas, curry. Now the combination is like making, if you eat, you use the sugar, you will get kesri bath. If you eat the hot stuff, you get the kara bath. Okay. Now if you remove the sugar part, you got a subfield. You can make only kara bath. But the rava has not changed. Okay, that's all there is to it. Okay. Rava remains rava still. Okay, so now that we made this clear, hopefully, is that clear? It must be very, the arithmetic is different, but on what we are doing arithmetic, that fellow is the same. So what have we got? So we have got F0 from W0 to C. From this we got a G0 from W0 to R and an H0 from W0 to R, but that H0 X, what did I get? Minus I G0 Ix. This is what I got, and my F0 was, I wrote F0 as X as G0 X plus I H0 X. Now this H0 X can be written as G0 X plus minus I G0 Ix. So therefore it says that if I can extend G0, I have very good hope of extending F0 itself, because I have to put the extended version here. Now G0 is a mapping, you think of it as being to W0 R star, right? It is now real function, real functional on the real norm linear space, and therefore by our old Horn-Barnard theorem, we can extend G0 to XR to R, such that I will put it this, G0 R is equal to little G0 R, W0 R. Is that clear? Just minus G0 Ix, obviously, because it has to be real. H0 has to be real, so it should be minus G0 Ix, right? Okay, so therefore it is minus I G0 Ix. So, okay. So now therefore we can extend this little G0 as a real linear functional on W0 with the same norm as the little G0 had. What does this statement mean? Let me explain this statement. This means modulus of G0 X divided by norm of X supremum over X belonging to W, X not 0 vector, and this is supremum X belonging to W, X not equal to theta, G0 X over norm X. These two numbers are now real numbers. G0, capital G0 and little G0 are all real numbers. Okay. Yeah, this is X in capital. Thank you. This is X in capital X. That's the bigger functional. So this is what this means. Okay. All right. So I have not shown that little G0 is a bounded functional. We will see later that G can show G0 is bounded. I will come to this question. I forgot to write that. So therefore, we have this. It is a bounded linear functional, and we can extend it. So therefore, now having got G0, now define capital F0 from W naught to C, the whole space. Now in the I now jump to the bigger space, the complex numbers also, using this identity, f naught x is equal to capital G naught x minus I capital G naught ix. Okay? Now all that I have to verify is this capital F naught is linear and this capital F naught coincides with the little f naught for every x in W naught, and this capital F naught is now complex linear and this capital F naught is bounded, and the norm of this capital F naught is the same as the norm of the little f naught. Then I would have got an extension even in the complex. Now every one of the steps is only verification now. So what we show, we then show one, f naught is complex linear functional on W on X. 2, f naught is bounded. So the two together means f naught belongs to X star, the original complex dual, and we show that that is an extension and we show that it is non-preserving extension. Norm of f naught on all of x is the same as norm of f naught as a function. Okay, norm of f naught star is equal to norm of w. So all these verifications will give us then that it is the exactly required extension. Okay. So what this boils down to say is to observe that the real and imaginary part are real linear functionals, real bounded linear functionals, and they are connected, so there is only one real linear functional there, and treat that real linear functional only in the real space, extend it, through that extend this complex fellow, and observe that that satisfies all our requirements. Okay. So that's that is the this thing. Okay. So what I will do is now this part is no problem. It is complex. It's over from the definition that it is complex, and the fact it is linear follows from the fact that this is real linear, this is real linear. So from that I must show that even if I can put complex alpha inside, then I will have to put a complex alpha here like I, but when I put I here, what is it that I cannot do? I cannot pull the I out. Ix is in W naught, but the operation does not allow you to pull the I out because it is only real linear. Okay, that is where the difference is. It is not the question whether Ix is in W naught or not, but the Ix, in the Ix, I cannot be pulled out of the linearity because it was linear. So therefore, the fact that whenever I put real alpha, that real alpha comes out is obvious because G naught is real linear. The only thing that I have to verify is when I put complex alpha, that complex alpha can also be pulled out. And of course, I must say it is additive. The additivity is no problem because G naught is additive and therefore it will automatically be additive. Additive does not involve multiplication by any numbers. So additivity follows from the additivity of G naught. Real linearity follows from the real linearity of G naught. We will get complex linearity if we also show that the I can be pulled out. If I can pull out the I, then I can pull out anything. Okay, because I could pull out real, I could pull out complex, sums can be split, so everything can be pulled out. So the only thing that I have to show here is that f naught Ix, which is equal to G naught Ix minus G naught minus x, is the same as I times f naught x. That is simple verification. Okay, use the properties of G naught and get it out of it. Okay, so I will leave it as an exercise to verify this. And boundedness, why is it bounded? The modulus of this will be less than or equal to twice or the modulus, square root of the modulus G naught squared, but G naught is bounded and therefore that whole thing will be bounded. So boundedness will be obviously following from the boundedness of G naught. These are simple verification, I will put it in the notes, okay. And the fact that it is an extension obviously follows because G naught is an extension. And because whenever you belong x belongs to W naught, capital G naught is the same as little g naught, so this will go down to little f naught and therefore capital F naught is the same as little f naught. So the extension follows from the definition, and the norm part is the only slightly non-trivial part, but that's not difficult. Okay. So let me skip that, I will put the details in the notes. So therefore what have we got? It doesn't matter whether you are dealing with complex linear space or with real nonlinear space, whenever you have a bounded linear functional on a subspace, you can always extend it to the whole space, maintaining the norm. Okay, that is the final clinch. So therefore we can state the Hahn-Banach theorem now as follows: HBT, let X be a real or a complex nonlinear space and W naught subspace F naught belongs to W naught star. Implies there exists F naught in X star such that 1, it is an extension for every x in W naught, and 2, it is norm preserving. Norm of F naught star is equal to norm of F naught W naught star. That is the final clinch. Okay, whether it is real or complex, it doesn't matter. So basically, therefore, what it says is, if you want to do complex thing, you have to do real thing twice. Okay, but and the linearity here makes that real also you have to do only once, because the other part is related to this part by the linearity. H naught is related to G naught, so you have to do the real part, real thing only once, you will get the extension. But in general, when you are dealing with complex things, you have to do basically, because C is R square, R cross R is C. Complex numbers is simply the plane. Okay, so therefore you have to do R and another R. These two R's you have to do, and you get basically C. But there is okay, that's the general idea. And the reason for that, why that dimension increased to infinity when I went to rational numbers is, I put two real numbers, I could get complex number. But in order to get a real number from a rational number, I have to put infinite number of them. I have to get a sequence only, and that is why that's a lot of work. Okay, from rational to reals, it is a lot of work. That is why whenever somebody says, makes a statement, it must be very clear what is the algebra you are talking about. I remember somebody was talking about the incidence matrix of a graph. You know what is that incidence matrix? If you say the node I is connected to the node J, I put 1, otherwise it is 0. And this person was calculating lot of things, treating that matrix as a matrix over the field Z2. Because all our zeros are zeros and ones, and suddenly this man computed the inverse as though it was a real matrix. So there is a lot of arguments, and it was unfortunately a PhD colloquium, and the person had to go back and get the things completely reworked, and some of these results were false because of that. Okay, anyway, so therefore you must be very clear as to what is arithmetic you are doing. You can't be jumping here and there. Everything must be very precise. Is this allowed? Is this what you are doing? Are you going to treat the incidence matrix as a matrix over Z2? Or are you going to treat the matrix over Q? Or you want to treat it as a matrix over the ring of integers? What do you want to do? You precisely state and then do it. Then don't do it and then adjust. Okay. Alright, so now let me recall. Let me do one or two things to complete the Hahn-Banach theorem. Recall that we introduced, when we had a nonlinear space and its dual, and then we had the double dual. Then when we introduced the natural embedding from the nonlinear space to the double dual, and we observed that the eta is linear transformation from here to there, and we had that it is non-preserving. We wanted to know whether, and also 1 for this we needed two lemmas, and that's what triggered Hahn-Banach theorem for us. And now that we have the Hahn-Banach theorem, those two lemmas are true, and therefore that is non-preserving and 1. Okay, so therefore we get as a consequence the natural embedding eta of x into x double star is linear non-preserving 1 transformation. Okay. So it's a neat code. The only thing is that code may not be complete. There may be many things left. So if it is onto, if eta is, in general it is not, if eta is onto, then we say x is reflexive. So now let's say what is it that we are asking for reflexivity. Here is x double star, here is x star, and here is x, and from here to here it is 1 and onto and non-preserving. Suppose we want reflexivity, we want eta to be, in addition to being linear 1 non-preserving, we also want it to be onto. So what does that mean? Suppose I take a sequence xn here, then I will have a corresponding sequence eta xn here, right? And if this sequence is Cauchy, what can I say about that sequence? What does Cauchy mean? Norm xn minus xm goes to 0 as n and m go to infinity. But now I want to look at this sequence, eta xn minus eta xm in this norm. But this norm is the same as this norm because it is non-preserving. So therefore if this is Cauchy, that will also be Cauchy. So that will also be Cauchy. But now what do you know about this space? The dual of anybody is always complete. We've shown that the dual of any nonlinear space is complete. So this is complete, therefore this eta xn will converge. What should that say about that? So this eta xn converges to some z. right? But that z must be equal to some eta x. Why? Eta is onto. That z must be equal to some eta x. So if eta xn converges to eta x, that means the norm of eta xn minus eta x must go to 0. But that would imply the norm of xn minus x must go to 0. The x must be here, right? So what does that say? The xn must also converge. Conclusion, every Cauchy sequence in x must converge, and therefore x must be a Banach space. So if it reflexive, it is forced to be a Banach space. You cannot expect a nonlinear space to be reflexive if it is not a Banach space. But on the contrary, just because it is a Banach space, you can't say it is reflexive. Okay, so therefore, a priori, for x to be reflexive, we need it to be a Banach space. So we can talk about only reflexive Banach spaces. We can't talk about simply reflexive nonlinear spaces. We can only talk about reflexive Banach spaces. But all Banach spaces need not be reflexive. Okay. I wanted to do much more, but I think we had a good discussion today. I am very happy that lots of questions were asked. I think that is the best way to learn. Okay. Sometimes some of the simple things will be bugging, and unless you cut these things out of your mind and get it clear. I hope you got some clarity on this fact that the connection between a vector space over a field and the same vectors as a vector space over a subfield. Okay, this is what it's like. You had a table and a chair. You kept the table, changed the chair. That's all. Okay, the room looks different. The table has not changed. That is all there is to it. Okay. Okay. Then I will do a few things here for 15 minutes next time. This brings in certain notions of convergence, okay, very important notions of convergence. See what we do in generally, whenever we are trying to solve a problem, we are not able to get exact solution. We are groping and trying to get some solution, then improve it, then try to improve it. So there is a sequence of approximation that we are trying to get. Now we want to eventually say that the sequence converges to the solution we want. But now then convergence means what? Converges in what sense? Okay, generally we want convergence in the best possible way. So that's probably not true. So we say, okay, I will write slightly weaker sense. So these notions of convergence are very strong, then weak, little weaker. So there are several levels of convergences are there. Suppose I have a function defined, a sequence of function defined on 0, 1. Just take 0, 1. Sequence fnx and I have fx. I want fnx to converge to fx. What do I mean? I may say at every point when I evaluate, fnx becomes a number, so I get a sequence of numbers. That sequence of numbers must converge to the number f of x. That's one way of asking. Another way of asking is, well, whenever I look at each point, the error can be made small after some stage, but that stage may vary from point to point. But I want all of them to be within the same error at the same stage. Therefore, that I want uniformly converging. That's another way of asking for convergence. I said, no, I don't have uniform. At every point also there is problem. There are many points where there is problem. but then I'll say, okay, let's look at it on an average. So look at the integral. So look at Fn minus F and look at the area enclosed by that. So the integral mod Fn minus F. If that goes to 0, I am all right. Something is happening. They are getting closer in some sense. But if Fn minus by F integral doesn't go, try square. Say energy converges. Okay, at every point the signal does not converge, but the approximated signal and the original signal, the energy difference is very small. That's another way I will look at. So there are umpteen number of convergences that come into the picture. So now we look at, I have a nonlinear space. First we look at two simple ways of convergence that we can talk about in a nonlinear space. And therefore the same two simple notions can be looked at X star as well. But now we will see that on X star we can introduce another notion of convergence. So we will introduce on X, any nonlinear space, two notions of convergence. One is norm convergence and other is the weak convergence. And on X star we will have the norm convergence, weak convergence. We will also introduce a notion called weak star convergence. So somehow or the other we want to see whether these two are close in some sense. Okay. So these are the number of notions of convergence, I think, is now increasing wildly. Many varieties of convergences that are being described, and there is same way see, convergence means certain notion of topology. The topology has connection with continuity. Continuity is also a topological notion. So there are several notions of continuity. It's unbelievable. There is something called hemi-continuity, demi-continuity, and just unbelievable notions of continuity, uniform continuity, absolutely continuity, semi-continuity, lower semi-continuity, upper semi-continuity, hemi-continuity, demi-continuity. Somehow or the other these two things are close. That's what we want to show. When these two fellows are close, that closedness idea I will change. If I define closeness to be this way, then these two are close. That's all I want to say. So in other words, I am going to define closeness so conveniently that it works. Okay, that's all my final idea is. So there are these three important notions of convergence: norm convergence, weak convergence, and weak star convergence, which I will introduce next time. After that, I will get into back to general bounded linear transformations and see what we do in finite dimensional vector spaces, how that could change in infinite dimensional vector spaces, how that could even change in when you are dealing with normed infinite dimensional vector spaces. So there are these three stages which we have to pass through, okay, from finite dimensional vector spaces to infinite dimensional vector spaces to infinite dimensional nonlinear spaces. Then we will have a idea of what all this means. Then we will see how what we did in finite dimensional, when we want to do in infinite dimensional vector spaces, what are the difficulties, how do we overcome them if at all it is possible. Then when we go to nonlinear infinite dimensional spaces, whether we can overcome, if not, what are the situations in which we will overcome. These are all what is known as basically linear transformation theory, and in particular if we take the space codomain and domain to be the same, the operator theory, the linear operator theory. Okay, so I will get it. So these are all in a sense generalizations of finite dimensional vector space theory and matrix theory. We will look at that the next chapter. Okay.